Happiness Falls started with the idea of two people going into the woods, a boy and his father, and only the boy returning home. And because the boy, who's 14, Eugene, is a non speaker, so he can't talk because he has autism and a rare genetic disorder called Angelman syndrome. We can't, the family doesn't know, and the police can't figure out what happened in the woods. And so that's sort of the image that I started with. And the line that came to me very early on, and I spent so much time trying to figure out what this meant, was we didn't call the police right away. And so I was like, why the police? Like, what happened that you needed to call the police? Why didn't you call the police right away? And what happened when you did finally call the police? So it was like kind of a natural structure for sort of the starting point for a novel. But it really also began with the family, which is a biracial Korean American family living in Northern Virginia. And, with this 14-year-old boy who is the youngest son, who is a non-speaker, and what that's like, and their experiences and their attempts to communicate with him, and how you connect with people without sort of oral communication, which, is kind of fundamental to the way that we connect with other people. And so it's really trying to think about that. But I had written about this family from a younger, like when they were, younger, when the kids were younger, in a magical realism short story, which was, I think, the last short story that was published in 2013 before I started working on Miracle Creek. So Mia is the 20-year-old older sister of Eugene. And I love Mia. So she is kind of neurodivergent, herself. She is one of these people that sort of like, she has a million thoughts in her mind and they all connect in some way. And so she'll be talking about something and it'll remind her of something else. And so she'll like go off to that. And you sort of think like, how does that relate at all to, what you're talking about? And then it does. There's this like cool connection that she makes. So I love being in her head because she is really fun. And she's also very sarcastic. And she's like a typical 20-year-old, and I say that as the mom of two boys who are around that age, like I have one son who is 20 and one who's 22, and they're both in college. And, like, I love them so much, and I'm positive that I was like this too. But, like, there's something about very smart kids who are smart on paper, who are like possibly not so, in like as far as common sense and like real life things. And then they also think that they know everything. So they're always like lecturing at you, or at least they are to me. I don't know why. And so I'm positive I was the same way, but it's very annoying, and it can be, but it's also very funny. Like, so she is very irreverent and she is kind of a know-it-all. She's one of these eye-rolly, 20-year-olds. And so I love her, but I also, she kind of grates on my nerves from time to time. And one of the pleasures of this book was it's told from just her perspective, which is huge difference from going from 7 POV characters in third person in Miracle Creek to first person, very intimate. She is really trying to tell us everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything, because she feels so much regret. She feels so much regret about some choices that she made in the beginning when the father first went missing, that she didn't do that. And that's why the first line, of we didn't call the police right away, it shows how much regret she feels and how much blame she places on herself for everything that happens in the book. And so she is kind of hard on herself. And one of the pleasures of the book is just sort of seeing her grow up and mature and go through some hard realizations about life and about herself. And, some of the things that the assumptions that she's been making about her father, her little brother. She's very um, she's hyperlexic. And so she uses a lot of words. She talks very fast. And she kind of thinks that her intelligence comes from that. I think a lot of us do that. We equate oral fluency with intelligence. And so, of course, that has ramifications with respect to her little brother, whom it turns out, this is not a spoiler in any way, because I think anybody who knows me, knows that I feel this way. It turns out that he is extremely smart. He just didn't have a way to speak them out loud, and they have to figure out some other ways to communicate with him. One thing that was really, really cool was that the process of researching this book really led me to some relationships that I still have today. Like just a couple nights ago, I was on Capitol Hill and I was moderating a discussion between three non-speakers who all communicate using a letterboard or a Bluetooth, what is it called? Keyboard. And so they, type letters sort of, one finger at a time because they all have motor issues. That's what actually affected their inability to speak, is their oral motor issues. And so I have a number of relationships with these non-speakers and organizations that are, groups of them. And I actually came to teach creative writing to a bunch of them too. So I got to know their inner worlds a lot through their writing and through helping them to express their writing, doing a lot of prompts and doing a lot of, giving feedback on their writing and things like that. And a lot of them were just, really sort of painful realization types of, coming of age stories and essays about that experience of what it's like to live with people who, love you, but find it so frustrating and underestimate you. And because by virtue of you not speaking, are just, assuming that you don't have the ability to understand, that you're truly nonverbal, like meaning you don't have any words. I have a little bit of a very, very limited temporary experience going through something like this myself. It's nothing like what, the non-speakers go through. But when I was 11, we moved from Korea to the US, and I didn't speak any English. And what was interesting about that experience was I knew that it was going to be hard logistically, like just getting along. It's going to be frustrating, not being able to talk. What I didn't realize until I went through it is how much shame I would feel and how embarrassed I would feel by the fact that I couldn't speak, even though there was a perfectly logical reason why I couldn't speak. And I understood that. But even so, that assumption, that deeply rooted assumption that equates oral fluency with intelligence, that was in me too. So when I couldn't speak, I felt stupid. And the other thing that I came to realize is, I very quickly, with immersion and all that, I very quickly learned to understand English so receptively, but I still couldn't speak it yet. And during that time, I realized how if you can't speak, people just assume that you can't understand. And so people were talking about me in front of me, like smiling as if they were being nice to me and saying nice things. But then like they were, of course, like making fun of me and my accent and my clothes and all sorts of things. And so it was middle school. So it was hard anyway. And, it was a humiliating experience and something that I carry around even today. Like, and it's been 40 years, since that happened, 40 years plus. And so I think that's what actually initially led me to want to write a story about a non-speaker, where that was at the core of the story, at the heart of the story. is my having gone through that and kind of being traumatized by it, and then learning about people, like Eugene, um, and realizing that some of these kids do have words and actually have can write beautifully and fluently. It's just you have to actually train them. You have to like teach them that, and you have to just assume competence. You have to assume that they're actually, in there cognitively. It's just a motor skills issue. And the kids who went through that were writing these gorgeous, gorgeous things. And the first time I talked to one of these non-speakers one-on-one, in person, I remember telling them my story and saying, I hope that it's not offensive to you that I'm kind of equating it. I'm not in any way equating it. I was like, I know that what I went through is nothing compared to what you're going through, but it gives me a little taste of what you must be going through on a daily basis. And, and this, student of mine, his name is Ian. I just saw him a couple days ago also, and he actually said to me, he using a letterboard that was held in front of them, and I could see his fingers, so I could see what letters he was pointing to as he was doing this. And he said, your experience is too similar to mine to ignore. And, please don't apologize. It gives you a level of empathy that is genuine. And I was like, yeah, it's that. So if I can just take what I felt in that, for those years and try to use that as the core of that frustration, the lifelong frustration that somebody like Eugene has, that's what enabled me, I think, to sort of be able to, like actually write his words, the words that he communicates to the family and to the police by the end. And also the way that he physically reacts, like when the police are asking him questions and, trying to handcuff him and trying to arrest him, all those things, that indignation and that frustration. So I did have a couple of police officers, one of whom actually read the entire book. His name is Mark Bergen. He is actually used to be a detective in Alexandria, Virginia, so in Northern Virginia, which is, where this takes place. The story takes place, and he is retired now, and he's a full-time writer. And so he was really helpful in being one of my first readers, and also just like getting on the phone with me whenever I was stuck and being like, okay, well, like, here's where I am in the story. Like, what do you think would be happening at this point? And then I have some other firefighters who are like, who do a lot of rescue for missing persons in Great Falls Park, which is, the park that kind of like forms the core of the park that is in my story. And so like talking to them about their rescue procedures and what they would do next, and, how that changed during COVID times, because this does take place in June of 2020. And talking to, some of the lawyers who represent some of these special needs juveniles, who are going through the process, and being like, well, how did that change during COVID? And like, what was the impact of that? Because that's all stuff that I kind of had a little bit of experience with before, but like certainly to update it, and then also like bring in the COVID factor, which was so fascinating too.